Today's story is all about hidden danger, danger that's in plain sight. You know, when I was young, my brother and I, we were little kids and we were swimming in the ocean in Maine. We went so far out and the water was still just like up to our knees. We were out there for probably an hour or two, who knows. When we got back later, my mom, she scared us wicked bad. She was like, that was a sandbar. You could have fallen off the edge and the undertow would have gotten you. And I don't even know if that's true or not, but it terrified me. And this story is kind of like that because it's one of those spots where you would never realize if you were right there that you are in a place that is insanely dangerous. And if you make one misstep, you will never escape. You will not come back. You're done. Here's a story, and just please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy our content. He was young, barely 20. A soldier, yes, but today he didn't look like one. His uniform was back in a suitcase under a borrowed bed, his boots polished and lined neatly along the wall. Out here, he wore a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up just so, the fabric darkening at the armpits from the summer heat. The laces on his shoes were worn to strings. One had broken earlier in the week and been tied back together with a knot that looked ready to give out at any step. He was walking with two friends he'd grown up with, boys from the same neighborhood in Bradford. They hadn't seen him in months, not since he'd gone off for training, and the reunion had been easy, natural. They walked the gravel roads, trading small stories, the kind you only tell when you know the people already know half of them. The neighbor's dog that still barked at every passerby, the pub that had been painted over as sour green and renamed twice in 1 year. The soldier laughed, his teeth white against tan skin, his face showing the lean muscle of someone drilled daily in push-ups and marches. By late morning, they reached Bolton Abbey. The ruins loomed like broken teeth against the sky, stone arches rising over grass that grew in cracks between the flagstones. They ducked through the archways, kicked loose pebbles that clattered across the courtyard, and sat down for lunch. One friend had cheese and pickle sandwiches. The soldier had ham on thick brown bread. He unwrapped his paper and frowned at a streak of mustard that had bled through the crust. Not quite army rations, he joked, and ate anyway. When they were done, they lay back in the grass. The soldier rested his head on his folded arms, staring up at clouds drifting in lazy procession. He hadn't slept like this in months. His friends teased him about dozing off right there, one of them flicking a crumb onto his shirt. He smiled but didn't move. The sun was warm. The grass smelled sweet. From below came the steady hush of the river, a low murmur that filled the silence between their jokes. Eventually they rose, brushed crumbs and grass from their clothes, and followed the river path downstream. The air cooled as they entered the woods, the sunlight breaking into shards through the canopy. Ferns brushed their calves. Gnats hovered in shafts of light. The soldier batted them away with lazy swipes of his hand. The path tightened, curving close to the river, forcing them into single file. One friend's boots squeaked with each step, damp leather refusing to dry since the last rain. They laughed about it, saying he'd sound like a duck all the way to Skipton. The river itself had changed, too. Back near the Abbey it had sparkled in broad meadows, full of light and chatter. But here it was different. The surface darkened, the current smoothed. The sound dropped to a low hum, almost a purr. It's like two rivers stitched together, one of them said. The soldier agreed. He slowed, running his hand along the mossy bark of a leaning oak, as if anchoring the thought. Then the path curved again, and they saw it. A pinch in the river, where the banks grew together, rocks closing in on both sides. The broad water they'd been following was suddenly forced into a channel no wider than a man could leap. The far bank looked close enough to touch. Moss climbed the stone, damp and gleaming in the shade. They stopped, staring. The soldier was the first to break the silence. I could clear that without breaking stride, he said. His voice wasn't boastful, just matter of fact, the way you'd say you could jog across a street before the light changed. Don't be daft, one of the others said, but the challenge hung in the air. It was the kind of remark that, once spoken, couldn't be unsaid. Every walker who had ever stood here must have thought that same thing. I could make it. The soldier stepped closer to the edge. The stone underfoot was slick with moss, but he didn't seem to notice. He looked down at the water. It slid past quietly, a black ribbon between the rocks. Nothing dramatic, no roar, no spray, no foam. Just calm, steady flow. He looked across again at the far side. 6 feet, maybe 7. His legs could manage that without question. He walked back 5 paces, planting each step deliberately, testing the spring in his shoes. He shook out his arms like he was loosening before a run. His friends muttered, uncertain, watching the way he bent his knees and fixed his gaze on the opposite ledge. He took off. The ground shook faintly with his sprint, and for one suspended instant, he was airborne, body stretched across the narrow void. His boots cleared nearly the entire gap. Nearly. The right one struck first, landing on the mossy stone. It slid half an inch, maybe more, his arms pinwheeled, reaching for balance. For a heartbeat, it looked like he might save it. He might catch himself. And then he slipped. The splash was abrupt, like a stone tossed into a pond. For a moment, it almost seemed routine, the kind of slip you laugh about later. His friends rushed to the edge, crouching low, scanning the water. Moments passed. The surface remained smooth. Time stretched forward, the silence tangible, an absence where there should be a presence. "He'll come up," one of them said. His voice cracked, but he said it again, firmer. "He's a strong swimmer. He'll come up." They leaned forward, eyes darting across the ripples, and then a bubble rose, popped, vanished. Was that him? They craned their necks, pointing. The seconds stretched, thick and heavy. "Wait, there! There!" one shouted, convinced he saw motion. But it was only a swirl of current, the water smoothing itself back again. They waited, shouting his name into the trees. The forest seemed to swallow their voices. The river slid past, calm, unhurried, its surface glinting dully in the shade. Another minute passed. 2. Their knees pressed into the moss, hands gripping the slick stone. They kept expecting his head to break the surface, his hand to slap the bank, coughing and laughing at his own misstep. But nothing came. One of them pulled a branch from the ground, stretching it out over the channel as if the soldier might suddenly grab hold. The branch dipped in the water, darkening as it soaked, but found nothing. The soldier's name was shouted again and again, louder, hoarser, until it felt like the entire woods must have heard. Still, the river gave no answer. The silence between the shouts grew longer. They began glancing at one another, each searching the other's face for hope, finding none. The realization crept in slowly, like a fog. He wasn't coming back. The place where he had vanished was as smooth and dark as before, as if he had never existed at all. The soldier was gone. The soldier story was heartbreaking, but it wasn't the first of its kind. In fact, it wasn't even unusual. Along this shaded stretch of riverbank, loss had been happening for centuries. And long before there were uniforms, coroners, or even printed newspapers, people here already knew what the Strid could do. They didn't understand hydraulics or geology, but they understood danger, and they carried that knowledge in the oldest form available to them: story. Generations of Yorkshire families told the same tale in whispers and warnings. Shepherds told it to their sons, mothers told it to their children, abbots told it to travelers passing through. The Strid was not just a place, it was a character, alive in people's minds, and it had a reputation for taking the young, the bold, the careless. It was said that the river ate its victims. Not drowned them, ate them. And the proof was in how complete the disappearances were. Once someone went in, they did not come back. The most famous of these tales is the story of the Boy of Egremont. He was the son of William Fitzduncan, a powerful lord of the north in the 12th century, and the heir to the vast estates centered at Skipton Castle. By all accounts, he was the very image of promise, young, well-born, healthy, and destined to carry his family line forward. But one day, while hunting in the woods near Bolton Abbey, the boy reached the Strid. He saw the narrow gap, so easily straddled by the eyes, and decided to leap across. Perhaps he was spurred on by companions, perhaps he was simply full of that unthinking confidence that comes with youth. Either way, he misjudged his step. In an instant, the river claimed him. His hound, legend says, tried to leap in after him, and was lost as well. A lesson in the malice and avarice of the river's appetite. The boy's body was never recovered. His death ended his line, and his inheritance passed to others. The story spread across Yorkshire. Monks at Bolton Priory prayed for his soul. William Wordsworth, centuries later, retold it in verse as the force of prayer, elevating the boy's fall into a meditation on fate and prayer. But even stripped of poetry, the tale had already done its work. It became a piece of folklore that carried both grief and instruction. Children were taught not to stand too close to the edges. Travelers were told not to dare the leap. The Strid was remembered as a living thing that swallowed the young without warning. And when we step back, we see how deeply mythic this story really is. It fits perfectly into the archetypes that repeat across cultures and times. The boy himself was an archetype, youthful, vigorous, embodying all the boundless potential of the future. His sudden death in the jaws of the river created a tragic contrast. Innocence and strength undone by an uncaring force. In that sense, he is the prototype for every later victim, from shepherd's children to the 20th century soldier. The river, too, becomes a mythic figure. It's not simply water flowing through stone, but an entity with an appetite. Locals described it as if it were alive. The river takes, the river eats. To personify the Strid in this way was not just poetry, it was survival. You may not understand subsurface hydraulics, but you can understand that something hungry lives there. And then there's the deeper symbolism. The river is a liminal barrier, a threshold between the living and the dead. Myths around the world give rise to this role. The Styx in Greek legend, the Celtic fjords, where warriors test themselves. At the Strid, the archetype is real. To step into this water is to cross over. People may not have thought of it in philosophical terms, but they felt it, and they told their children, do not tempt it. Finally, there's the principle of faithless appearances, like the sirens tempting sailors to their doom. On the surface, the Strid is quiet, serene, even beautiful. Birds sing overhead, trees lean gracefully across the gorge. The water looks calm, safe. But this gentleness is a disguise. Beneath the surface lies something instantly lethal. The story of the Boy of Egremont encodes that lesson in unforgettable form. Appearances lie, and death may wear the mask of beauty. Taken together, these features reveal why myths form around places like the Strid. Myth is not just entertainment, it's memory made portable. Communities needed a way to warn each other about a danger they couldn't explain in physical terms, so they created stories. Those stories gave the Strid a voice, a hunger, a personality. They made the lesson impossible to ignore. The Boy of Egremont's tale, retold for centuries, was less about mourning a noble heir than it was about arming the next child, the next traveler, the next curious walker with a simple truth. This place is deadly. So when the soldier in 1963 vanished before his friends' eyes, locals were saddened, yes, but not surprised. They had always known that this was the Strid's way. His story was new, but the pattern was ancient. It was the same pattern encoded in the Boy of Egremont, carried through time and myth, warning, and prayer. For centuries, people explained the Strid through myth. The Boy of Egremont was taken because the river was hungry or cursed, or marked as a boundary to another world. But in truth, the Strid doesn't need curses. Its power comes from physics. To understand why no one survives a fall into this place, start with the River Wharfe upstream. There, the wharf is broad, 30 feet across, flowing steadily in plain view. Imagine a wide hallway in a school or hospital, people walking side by side, spreading out or bumping elbows. There's space to move, and although it's busy, it doesn't feel overwhelming. Now imagine someone shuts that hallway down to just a few feet wide, but keeps the same number of people flowing through. Suddenly everyone is crammed together, forced shoulder to shoulder, moving faster and faster just to squeeze through. That is what happens to the wharf at the Strid. 30 feet of water is funneled into 6. The water doesn't disappear, it just has no choice but to accelerate and to go somewhere. At the Strid, it goes down. The river dives into the rock. The bed here is made of millstone grit, a coarse sandstone laid down millions of years ago. Over centuries, the relentless push of water has carved deep undercuts, caverns, and vertical shafts beneath the banks. The result is not a neat little channel, but a hidden labyrinth of voids, some straight down, others sideways, some roofed over by stone. To the eye, the surface looks smooth, but just inches beneath, the river is plunging through these unseen corridors at terrifying speed. This is why the Strid kills so quickly. The moment someone falls in, the current doesn't just push them downstream like a normal river. It yanks them under, dragging them into side chambers, pinning them against stone with hundreds of pounds of force. Even the strongest swimmer can't resist because the water isn't only flowing past, it's wrapping around, sucking down, spinning back. In some spots, the turbulence is so violent that water moving one way at the surface is moving the opposite direction a few feet below. You can't orient yourself. You can't fight your way free. In the surface, deceptively calm. That's the cruelest part. The violence is hidden below while the top layer slides by like a pane of glass. It looks peaceful enough that someone standing at the edge could believe it's shallow, maybe 4 feet deep, just a brook in the woods. But there is no shallow safe zone. The downward jets and suction reach right to the surface. You are caught the instant you touch the water. That is why the soldier disappeared so suddenly, why his friends never even saw him struggle. The Strid doesn't allow a struggle. It just takes. Think of it this way. Most rivers announce their danger. Rapids froth white, waterfalls roar, floodwaters spread wide and obvious. The Strid is different. It hides its danger behind quiet ripples, and that makes it more lethal than any roaring cataract. Geology explains how this came to be. Millions of years ago, the wharf was cutting its way down through layers of gritstone. The stone is hard but full of joints and fractures. Water found those weaknesses, exploited them, widened them into undercuts. During floods, when the wharf carried whole trees and boulders, those objects became tools, grinding away at the stone, hollowing out deeper pockets beneath the banks. Slowly, century by century, the Strid became not just a river channel, but a series of hidden caves filled with rushing water. What makes the Strid so unique is this combination. A large river, suddenly forced into a narrow slot over a bed of stone soft enough to carve but hard enough to leave overhanging ledges. Elsewhere in the world you might find slot canyons and deserts or subterranean rivers and limestone, but rarely do you find all of these features in one place. That's why the Strid has the reputation it does. There really isn't any other stretch of water quite like it, and this uniqueness explains its folklore too. People knew long before fluid dynamics or geology that this place was different. They didn't have the equations to prove it, but they had the evidence. Sons, daughters, nobles, soldiers, gone in an instant. They built myths to carry the warning forward, because the danger was so counterintuitive. A raging waterfall looks deadly. A calm brook does not. Without story, without myth, people would keep misjudging it. So the Strid became a character, a hungry mouth, a liminal gate. And beneath those layers of culture was always this simple, brutal reality. Water forced into a narrow, stone-bound throat, rushing with unstoppable violence into chambers no human eye could see. The soldier's disappearance in 1963 could have been mistaken for a one-off tragedy, but when placed beside the Boy of Egremont's fall centuries earlier, and the countless other unnamed victims in between, a pattern emerges. The Strid is not just a river feature, it's a stage where human stories repeat themselves across generations, regardless of age, class, or era. Youthful strength, noble birth, soldier's discipline, none of it matters here. For the people who live with the Strid, myth became their language of survival. They told stories that personified the river as a devourer, a threshold, a trickster wearing the mask of calm. Those myths were not just a decoration, they were memory turned into warning, passed down to protect others from making the same mistake. Today, science explains what folklore always knew. The Strid is a death trap hidden in plain sight. The physics of narrowing channels and subsurface caverns reveal the truth behind the legends. But even now, the lesson feels less like a formula and more like a story. Because at its heart, the Strid is a reminder that beauty can be faithless, that danger can live just beneath the surface, and that some places in the world resist human strength, reason, or will. It is the quietest of rivers, and perhaps the deadliest, and it waits still, smooth on top, chaos below. A river that has been swallowing lives for centuries, and will continue to do so, as long as someone is tempted to believe they can cross.